Hey everyone, welcome. If you're ready to dive into one of the most fascinating chapters in human history, well, you're in the right place. Today, in this explainer, we're looking at a society that literally rivaled modern urban planning. And I'm not talking about 100 years ago. I mean over 5,000 years ago. We are talking about the incredible Indus Valley Civilization.
Okay, so this sounds impossible, right? But did you know that a 5,000-year-old city actually had a better underground drainage system than a lot of modern cities do today? Seriously, it completely shatters that whole stereotype we have of prehistoric people just living in caves. These guys had covered drains, underground sewage, and a level of sanitation that we are literally still trying to achieve in some parts of the world right now. It's just mind-blowing.
Okay, let's jump right into this. Here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at this as an advanced, ancient civilization. Then, we'll cover their amazing town planning, check out the major cities of the IVC, and explore their agriculture and advanced trade. After that, we'll touch on their religious beliefs in society, and finally, look at the decline of this great civilization. So it's highly organized to help you lock in exactly what you need to know.
All right, let's start with Section 1, an advanced ancient civilization.
The modern discovery of this ancient wonder kicked off around 1921, led by Sir John Hubert Marshall, although, their Mesopotamian trading partners had actually known them as Meluha for a long time. It's also called the Harappan Civilization, named after Harappa, which was one of the very first sites discovered. But guys, the sheer scale of this is staggering. It spanned a massive 13 lakh square kilometers. That's bigger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia put together. It evolved through three distinct phases: early, mature, and late. But the true hallmark, the thing that really puts them on the map, is their unprecedented urban planning and sanitation.
Which brings us right to Section 2, amazing town planning.
Their living spaces show this clear, really brilliant compartmentalization of society. The cities were primarily divided into two main parts. First, you had the citadel, which was raised up on this massive 6-meter-high artificial platform. Just think about the engineering that took. That height acted as a built-in flood defense system, and it's where the rulers or important public buildings likely were. Then, down below, you had the lower town. This sat at a normal elevation and was basically the bustling residential hub for the everyday citizens.
Now this next detail is just ingenious. Their streets were built on a rigorous grid pattern, intersecting at perfect 90-degree angles. And they didn't just do that to make it look nice. They actually aligned their main streets, north-south and east-west, to maximize the natural flow of wind and sunlight. So their streets literally functioned as a natural air conditioning and lighting system for the entire city. How cool is that?
So where were all these incredible streets actually located? Let's take a quick geographical tour in Section 3, Major Cities of the IVC. If you're prepping for exams, you'll definitely want to lock in these crucial data points. First up, we've got Harappa, discovered by Dea Ramsani in 1921, which is famous for its massive granaries. Then there's Mohenjo Daro, discovered a year later, sitting right on the Indus River and home to the Great Bath. We've also got Lothal over in Gujarat, featuring what's considered the world's very first man-made dockyard designed specifically for tides. And then there's Mohenjo Daro. Now this one is fascinating because notice the key feature here. It had absolutely no citadel. It was purely an industrial hub, a massive center for bead-making and crafts. Because of that, historians sometimes call it the Lancashire of India.
887. That is the exact square footage of the Great Bath in Mohenjo Daro. But it's not just the size that's impressive here. To keep the water from leaking out, the Harappans coated the bricks with a thick layer of natural tar and bitumen. They literally invented modern waterproofing techniques thousands of years ago just for their ritual bathing.
And sticking with Mohenjo Daro for a second, how about this number, 700? Try to imagine a single ancient city having 700 perfectly constructed brick wells. It just showcases this unparalleled ancient water management system. They made sure that almost every neighborhood, and sometimes even individual homes, had direct access to clean, fresh water.
Let's rapidly highlight some of the other fascinating finds across the map. Dalavira, which was located in a really dry region, was incredibly advanced. It had 16 rock-cut reservoirs for water conservation and even gave us the world's oldest 10-letter signboard. Then you have Kalibangan, which shows the world's oldest plowed field, proving they had systematic agriculture, along with 7 fire altars. Rekigari is actually the largest site of the entire civilization. And Surkotada is super unique because it gives us very rare evidence of actual horse bones, which is an animal you really don't commonly find in the Indus Valley.
To really grasp the size of that 13 lakh square kilometer area we talked about earlier, Think of the empire's boundaries almost like a giant compass rose. Up north, you have Manda and Jammu in Kashmir. Down south, it stretched all the way to Daimabad in Maharashtra. Over in the east, you've got Alamgirpur in Uttar Pradesh, and all the way across to the west is Sutka Gendor, right near the Iran border in Balochistan. It was a truly massive geographical footprint.
But how on earth did they sustain such a massive population? Well, let's shift our focus to Section 4, Agriculture and Advanced Trade.
The big takeaway here is that they were absolute agricultural pioneers. They were actually the very first people in the world to cultivate cotton. The ancient Greeks were so impressed by this that they called it Sindon, which comes from Sind. They also grew wheat, barley, peas, sesame, and dates. And here's a vital detail. They didn't just sit around crossing their fingers waiting for the rivers to flood. Evidence found way over in Shortugai, Afghanistan, proves they engineered sophisticated irrigation canals to actively water their crops.
And once they had a surplus of goods, they traded. Their ancient export process feels remarkably modern, honestly. First, they'd gather resources using inlined barter with bullock carts. Then, they would package their goods and stamp a wet clay seal right onto the knot. If that seal was still intact when it arrived, you knew the goods hadn't been messed with. It's literally their version of modern secure packaging and corporate branding. Finally, these branded goods were shipped internationally from massive dockyards like the one at Lothal.
Now, this is actually one of my favorite facts. How do you pull off fair, standardized international trade when you don't have money? Because remember, they had no coins. Well, they did it through rigorous mathematics. They used a perfect base 16 standardization. Their weights were carved from church stone and were precisely scaled in multiples of 16, so 16, 32, 64, and so on. It was total precision across an entire empire, just to make sure nobody got cheated. Okay, let's move from the economic side of things over to the personal, in Section 5, Religious Beliefs and Society.
One of the most iconic artifacts we've ever discovered is the Pashupati seal from Mohenjo Daro. It's a steatite seal showing a three-faced figure sitting in a deep yogic posture, surrounded by an elephant, a tiger, a rhino, and a buffalo. The famous archaeologist Sir John Marshall identified this figure as Proto-Shiva, and this tiny little stone actually gives us what many consider to be the earliest historical evidence of yoga and meditation practices.
Looking at artifacts like that helps us piece together their daily spirituality. We know they heavily worshiped the mother goddess, which is super evident from the countless terracotta figures we found. They also held nature sacred, especially the peepal tree, and they had this mysterious one-horned animal they worshipped, often just called a unicorn. They wore amulets to ward off evil spirits, and they definitely believed in an afterlife, burying their dead with jewelry and copper mirrors at places like the R37 cemetery. But here's a huge, surprising fact you want to remember for your exams. Despite all those animal depictions on their seals, there is zero clear evidence of cows or horses on them. Kind of wild, right?
So how does an empire this organized and advanced just disappear? That brings us to our final section, Section 6, Decline of this great civilization.
The most important thing to understand here is that this wasn't just one catastrophic bad day. It was a domino effect, a compounding series of disasters. Now, early on, there were theories about an Aryan invasion, but modern evidence points much more heavily toward natural and ecological devastation. We're talking about repeated, massive floods, terrifying earthquakes, the actual shifting and drying up of the rivers they relied on, severe climate change, and eventually the spread of deadly epidemics. Their ecological balance was just completely shattered.
And that brings us to a really profound realization. Development is only sustainable when we maintain a balance with nature. Think about it. The Indus Valley Civilization had the absolute best technology, the best urban planning, and the best trade networks of their entire era. But when the climate shifted and their rivers dried up, all those perfectly built brick cities couldn't save them. It is honestly the ultimate historical lesson we have to take away from studying their rise and fall.
I want to leave you with this final, kind of provocative thought. We know all of this stuff about their towns, their baths, and their trade networks, but we still cannot read their writing. Their pictographic script remains completely undeciphered to this day. So as you continue your own studies, just ask yourself, once we finally crack that ancient code, what other brilliant secrets are quietly waiting for us in the ruins? Keep questioning, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.